gave up being a musician and playing in bands sometime in 1973. Right around the time I reached the peak of my pre-adolescent career. Playing on stage to a packed auditorium at Emerson Junior High School with my band, Sudden Death Overtime. We played a version of Jumping Jack Flash, with me strumming like Keith Richards on my blonde Telecaster, while our barely pubescent lead singer, Tom Finn, wowed the preteen girls in his gold velvet jumpsuit, open to his navel, exposing his hairless chest. The hulking, long-haired Chris Kimball flanked Tom on the other side of the stage and resembled a 12-year-old version of Neil Young, slashing against my rhythm on a Gibson knockoff. They were the bad boys, while our drummer Andy Kaplan was like me, more of a nerdy good kid who qualified for the band more with dedicated practice and a love of music than with any kind of attitude or coolness. I don't remember the bass player. Any bass players here tonight? We played our only full gig on the school's playground, not far from where I had once given Michael Jackson change for a quarter. It was only a couple of years after that initial burst of rapid-fire Jackson 5 hit singles, and right about the time he had gone solo with the alluring but less successful Got to Be There. In other words, he was on the verge of being a has-been at the age of 12, and his parents put him in public school for a semester, maybe to give him a sense of grounding, maybe to save a few bucks. Based on my one encounter with Michael Jackson, this apparently wasn't the best idea, since moments after giving him a couple of dimes and a nickel, he ended up being chased by screaming girls across the concrete field just past the spot where we had gigged only weeks earlier. I wonder if he saw our set. That was the end of my first go-round as a performing musician. This was 1973. There was no indie music scene. The clubs were only seen as stepping stones to playing sports arenas. You were a star or you were a nobody. I kept the Telecaster, but it stayed in the closet for the next 5 years. I was done. I quit. I wasn't looking back. I was born in a crossfire hurricane, and I howled at my mom's driving rain. But it's alright, in fact it's a gas, but it's alright. Jumping Jack Flash, it's a gas, 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 gas. Yeah, that's the, of course, the big hit by Sudden Death Overtime. Later covered by the Rolling Stones. I wrote a book, and the book is called I Wouldn't Say It If It Wasn't True. That's why I'm here tonight. I wrote a book. And it's a book about a lot of things. It's a book about growing up in Los Angeles, falling in love with music, becoming a music fan, learning to play guitar, forming a band, and breaking up the band. But it's also a book about songwriting. I'm a songwriter. Can't help it. I have written and recorded over 400 songs. Thank you. I wasn't fishing because I have written and not recorded over 2,000. And there's a reason for those songs not being heard. But there's one song I never played on tour before I did this book show. But I'm playing it now on this tour because it's the first song I ever wrote. I was 9 years old. When you're 9 writing a song, what is your motivation? You know, to write about
your goldfish, a little cute girl down the street maybe, maybe your favorite baseball player. I did that later. Now, when I was 9, the first song I wrote was called Sing My Blues. I was a very morose little 9-year-old. But yeah, I wrote that song at 9. Strangely enough, around that time, when I was 9, my sister threw a party that I went to, and Mac Davis was at the party. Los Angeles, you know. Mac Davis was at the party, and there was a guitar, so I picked up the guitar and said, Mac, I want to play this song I wrote. That kind of kid. I played it for him. He said, I'm going to get that song published for you, booger. This song remains unpublished. No one there to walk with us, no one there to talk with us, no one there to sing with us, no one there to cling to us, no one there to play guitar, no one there from near and far, no one there to wear my shoes, no one there to sing my blues, sing my blues, pay my dues, or watch me lose. Sing my blues, yeah. Sing My Blues, first song. I've been playing that song, and every so often people say, did you really write that when you were 9 with like all those bar chords? I said, yes, I had very strong hands. Anyway, yeah, write the song, and sudden death overtime, quit at 13, you got all that part, catching you up. But at 17, after quitting music, 17, I came back. It was a big comeback. I'm sure you all heard about it. Read about it in Rolling Stone. I came back like Oasis. I was back. Except I was an only child, so I was Noel and Liam at the same time, fighting with myself at every turn. I came back, and the reason is I was born in 1960, so I turned 17 at the age, in the year 1977, and that's the year, of course, that punk rock began. And I'd hear bands like the Sex Pistols, and the Clash, and the Buzzcocks, and the Undertones, and I'd say, that's the kind of music I'm into now, and that's the kind of music I could actually play. I couldn't play. A couple of years before, you had to play like Genesis or Gentle Giant or some other band that starts with G, prog rock. But this kind of music I could play. I said, I want to start a band, in this punk rock style. I moved from Los Angeles up to a city called Davis, California, to go to school, UC Davis. I majored in rhetoric. They had a rhetoric program at UC Davis. I got a major in rhetoric. If you can master bullshit, you can do anything. I do that. So I went there, and I wanted to start a band. And first day in school, I had a rhetoric class. And before it began, I heard a girl across the room talking to her friends. And she said, I really want to see the Jam play at Winterland next week in San Francisco, but I don't have a way to get there. I walked over to her and I said, I'm going to that concert. I have a car, a 1975 Gremlin. Red. Oh yeah, AMC. I will drive you in my Gremlin to the Jam show. She said, great, cool. She was into this music. And in a city like Davis, there were probably like 40 people who'd even heard of the Jam, so it was good to find someone like that. And I said, we started talking about bands, and I said, I play guitar and I write songs, and I want to start a band, And she said, well, I was in the high school choir. I said, great, you're the lead singer. Her name was Kendra Smith, and she plays a big part in the story I'm telling here today. So we went to that show. We started a band, a new wave band. Training Wheels, new wave band. Third, fourth grade Blondie meets talking. It was called Suspects, a new wave name. And we had a couple other people in the band who ended up in a band called True West. Russ Tolman and Gavin Blair. So you might know that band, True West. We were like a super group, but not that super. But in this band, I remember the bass player. His name was also Steve Sutral. He was an older guy. We were all 17 or 18, and he was, old, really old, like much older. He was 28. Oh, wow. When you're 18, that's old. But being 10 years older at that point in time, he knew about a lot of music that we didn't. He turned us on to music. He'd seen bands play that we just, we had begun to discover. We got into the Nuggets record and loved bands like the Count Five, and the Sonics and the Standells and all these bands. And he had seen all these bands play live. Wow, tell us more, tell stories, play us records. We tell him when we got into bands. We said, Steve, we just got into the Monkees. He said, you shouldn't like the Monkees. They were everything we hated. We don't like the Monkees anymore. It was good having something like that in your life. And I know in Athens there were people at Walk Street Records and places like that would turn you on to cool music. And it meant a lot to have a filter like that in my life. And he took a special liking to me because I was a songwriter, an avid music fan, hungry to learn and discover. And one day before practice at his house, he said, Steve, I want to play you a band you may not have heard of. I think will have a big influence on you. I think you should check this out. I'm excited. What's he going to play for me? You're just like, wow, I want to hear this. He pulls the record out from the stack, puts it on the turntable, puts on the needle. Goes down in slow motion like a bad biopic. I look over his shoulder at the record cover, and there's a banana on the cover. I said, that's kind of weird. The needle touches the record, and that was the moment that changed my life. Sunday morning brings the dawning. It's just a restless feeling by my side. Early dawning, Sunday morning. It's just the wasted years so close behind. Watch out, the world's behind you. There's always someone around you who'll call. It's nothing at all. Sunday morning, and I'm falling. I got a feeling I don't want to know. Early dawning, Sunday morning. It's just the streets you crossed not too long ago. Watch out, the world's behind you. There's always someone around you who'll call. It's nothing at all. Peter Buck. Behind you, there's always someone around you who will call. It's nothing at all. Sunday morning, many of you know, right, yeah. The Velvet Underground did really change my life and blow my mind for a lot of reasons. I can name 3 in particular. 1, Lou Reed's great songs. Amazing songwriter. Just some of the best songs ever written. Fantastic. But 2, that the Velvet Underground would take these great songs and cloud them with distortion and noise and feedback, and just like almost bury the greatness of the songs so you had to dig it out yourself. That was a new thing. I didn't know you could sabotage your own songs like that. I mean, that cool. Wow, I like that. But 3, and maybe the biggest thing that really was different than anything I'd known before, was that the Velvet Underground were the first band I'd ever encountered. They weren't trying to be big. They weren't trying to be successful. They weren't trying to be top of the charts. Forget it. No way. They were there with the people who understood what they were doing, who got it. If you, like the Velvet Underground, you were part of a select group, you know, and if you didn't, there were other bands for you. The Monkees. About a week ago, somebody said, "Why do you hate the Monkees?" I like the Monkees. I like the Monkees. And monkeys as well. No, but they were, you know, it was a special thing, and that kind of excited me. And from that point on, I didn't want to be a fan of any mainstream band, any known band. I wanted to find the most obscure bands and be into them. If I liked a band, and a friend of mine liked the band that I was into, I didn't like the band. No way. I wanted to be a fan of the most obscure band. And I found that band, the band that was unknown, that spoke to my heart and soul, that felt like the record was coming out the grooves, just made for me. And it was a band called Big Star. A lot of Big Star fans here tonight. Great. In 1978, and I have done extensive research on this, on Wikipedia. In 1978, in the entire world, there were exactly 18 Big Star fans. I play in bands with all of them. One actually plays in the band. But it's true, they were pretty much unknown, and that kind of made the music even more beautiful somehow. You know, the saga of Alex Sheldon, a guy who, at the age of 16, as legend has it, went into a studio in Memphis, and after hanging out all night, smoking cigarettes and drinking in a graveyard, walks up to a microphone in the morning and goes, "Give me a ticket for an airplane. Ain't got time to take a fast train." The letter, the box top's top of the charts, hit after hit. Neon Rainbow, Cry Like a Baby, Soul Deep, all these great songs. You know, Ed Sullivan Show, American Bandstand, the whole 9 yards. And he breaks up the band to form a much better band. A band with beautiful songs, great playing, great production, the perfect pop band. And of course they call themselves Big Star. And they weren't big stars. They called their first record #1 record. It wasn't a #1 record. And man, that just made the melancholy song sound much sadder. I just would imagine from my home, who had moved back to Los Angeles by then, I would imagine Alex Sheldon, as I thought of him, somewhere in a basement in Memphis, crying into his red wine at night, wondering how it all went wrong. A tortured poet. Some tortured, sad poet. A tortured poet like Leonard Cohen. Or a tortured poet like Nick Drake. A tortured poet like Taylor Swift. And I decided, man, I've got to track this guy down. I got to meet him. I got to see what makes him tick. Like a stalker. And I was. I decided, I'm going to get on a Greyhound bus straight to Memphis and find Alex Sheldon. Back around that time, Greyhound had a special deal. $200, you could travel the country all summer and unlimited, so that's it. How will I find him? There was a record that was out at the time by a band called the Pantherbirds, and the sticker on the front of the record, my local store, said, "New band from Memphis featuring Alex Sheldon," and there was an address in Memphis on the back. And I'm going to Memphis to find him. Straight from LA to Memphis, never stopping once. No, I stopped once. In New Mexico at a Burger King to get a hamburger. I couldn't afford a cheeseburger. I dreamed of someday having a cheeseburger, but just a hamburger. Got to Memphis, 9 in the morning, fresh off the bus. not that rush. Bus for 2 days. Fresh off the bus, I go to the address on the back of the record, knock on the door, 9 in the morning, and a guy answers the door. And he's got a pompadour up to here. He's got a pencil-thin mustache. He's wearing a purple frilly shirt. He is decked out. I think this guy's really fancy for 9 in the morning. But I steel myself up when I say, I'm Steve from Los Angeles, 2,000 miles on the Greyhound bus to find my hero, Alex Chilton. He said, oh, he doesn't live here. But I know where he drinks at night. I can take you. His name was Tav Falco. Kind of unknown back then, but Tav, yeah. Tav Falco. I didn't know what a Tav Falco was, but Tav takes me to this bar in downtown Memphis, and sure enough, there's Alex Chilton sitting in the bar, this old man's bar downtown. Lefty Frizzell playing the jukebox on repeat, you know, and there he is. So I sit down next to Alex and I say, you know, Steve, Los Angeles, 2,000 miles, big fan, blah, 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 and he says, what's your sign? His opening gambit, some people might know, Pisces. Anyway, I said, yeah, we talked for a while. And he was very interesting and interested. He was really just, you know, great conversationalist. We talked about literature and Memphis history and art and architecture, whatever, all kinds of things. Sex, he liked talking about sex a lot. And we talked about all these things, and there's one thing he did not want to talk about, and that was Big Star. I said, hey, Alex, you think Big Star's gonna make another record someday? And he said, yeah, that's what the whole world needs. Another Big Star record. And I was crushed. My hero was bitter about his own music, but that's okay. You know, I was happy to hang out with him. For the next 7 days and nights, I'm buying Alex Chilton beer and cigarettes. And like I said, I did not have much money. It was great. I was hanging out with, you know, Alex Chilton. And this is all from the book. This is the large version of the book that my wife Linda put together for me with big type. Your model may vary. I went to the bar for 7 days, and Alex was at his usual spot. I wandered over and sat in the seat next to him. He was as welcoming as usual, and he asked if I was having a beer, which I knew was code for a request for me to buy a couple for us to drink. I checked my remaining funds and estimated what I needed for my trip ahead. And I was a little alarmed. I was not hanging on to as much money as I'd hoped to have for the coming weeks, especially in those days before you could extract money from a wall with a mere piece of plastic and a few remembered numbers. I knew that my days as the deep pockets barfly needed to come to an end. Alex, I said, I hate to say it, but I really can't afford to keep buying you beers and cigarettes. Alex replied, well, you don't have to stay neither, do you? I knew it was time to go. I'm going to play a song by Alex right now. In the book, the story goes a lot further than that. We actually got to know each other a little more over the years. We ended up on the same label together in the 80s, played a festival sometime a few years after that, so kind of worked together. And at one point, he actually did a Big Star show in Brooklyn that I went to, and there were about 1,000 people there, loving the music. It was so great. Cheering loudly. He even cracked a smile a couple times. And it was great. And after the show, he saw me, flagged me and said, hey, let's talk. We talked about an hour that night. It was really nice. Talked about a lot of things. Didn't talk about my trip to Memphis. I told him that my wife Linda and I were going to be going to New Orleans, where he was living in a few months. He said, well, here's my number. Look me up. I will show you around. He died 6 weeks later, at the age of 59. But the music lives on and is more popular than ever due to a great band that's out there playing the music on tour throughout the world. I'm going to play one of those songs right now. Angels from the realm of glory, stars shine bright above. Royal David City was bathed in light and love. Jesus Christ was born today. Jesus Christ was born. Jesus star, but if you're not, after the show, go home and just listen to all their records. They're so good. It's great albums. On this trip, on my little trip cross country in the Greyhound, which eventually moved on to Nashville, Washington, D.C., and finally New York, where I live now, I had a cassette with me, a cassette in my pocket, of a new song I'd written. And I felt like this was the best song I'd ever written. It was the first time I'd written a song that I honestly could say to myself, if I heard that song in a record store or on the radio, I'd want to own that record, I'd want to buy that record. It was exciting, it's a good feeling when you kind of cross that line. I thought maybe I'd play the cassette for somebody on my trip. You know, somebody would say, I'm going to put that record out. Or just say, I like that, whatever. Maybe Alex Chilton would say, you know, I'm going to get that song published for you, booger. But no, I was too shy. Instead, I went back to Los Angeles and decided to form a band, playing this kind of music. Inspired, sure, by Big Star, the Velvet Underground, things like that. Went back to LA and decided to form a band. First person I called was Kendra Smith, my new wave singer back in Davis. I said, Kendra, do you want to be in my new band? She said, yes, but I don't want to be the singer. I want to play bass. I just started playing bass. I'd like to do that. Steve, you should be the singer. I had never sung. Not in the shower. Not in my dreams. But my favorite singers at the time were, you know, people like Bob Dylan, Lou Reed, Tom Waits. So I figured, how hard could it be? I'm a singer. We needed the guitars. We put an ad in the local, you know, advertising newspaper for guitars. And one guy shows up. Okay, he shows up. And he's this painfully thin, tall guy with a, you know, like a jet deck page boy kind of haircut thing, a beat up old hollow body guitar. And he hears my, you know, my new song. He plays nothing but distortion and noise and feedback in all the wrong chords. And I said, that's the guy I want in the band. His name was Carl Procoda, and he's in the band. We needed a drummer. There was a band in, at the time in LA called Human Hands that were kind of popular. They would, you know, headline the Whiskey Go-Go. They had records. They got played on the radio. And Kendra met Dennis Duck, the drummer from that band, at a party, and somehow convinced him to come to rehearse with us. Dennis Duck's going to rehearse with us? All right. Came down to our basement, actually, to where we were rehearsing. Walked in with a boom box and recorded the rehearsal. Didn't say a word. We decided that we'd play Susie Q for an hour and, you know, see if he could handle it. Didn't say a word. He left. A couple days later, I called him on the phone. I said, Dennis, thank you for coming to our rehearsal. Did you listen to that tape you made? He said, yes. I've listened to nothing else for the last 3 days. I will say, when I brought out that song, I carried it in my pocket on the cassette across the country, and we, the four of us, played together for the first time. I knew we had a band.
Yeah, he did.
Oh, bass song.
Oh, okay. So you were, yeah. I know we're getting a comedy show too.
We have pretty good telepathy after all these years, but I shouldn't want to send this. I shouldn't think it's...
That wasn't really paying attention.
Tell you that we've been through this. I know I told you that before. I try to find out where we missed. It gets to be such a chore. 'Cause ever since that time I told you so, something gets my mind and I don't let go. And then stories of words here and gone. That's what you always say. I try to sit and talk with you. You know how moods change all the time. I try to wait a week or two, but by then I'd probably change my mind. 'Cause ever since that time I told you it's so. Something gets my mind and I don't let it go. And there's stories and words they hear and gone. 'Cause that's what you always say. I tried to sit and talk with you. You know, moods change all the time. I tried to wait a week or two, but by then I probably changed my mind. 'Cause ever since that time I told you it's so. Something gets my mind and I don't let it go. And then stories and words, they're here and gone. 'Cause that's what you always say. Stories and words, they're here and gone. 'Cause that's what you always say. Stories and words, they're here and gone. 'Cause that's what you always say. We've actually all these years never done a duo show like this before, so yeah. Well, not that we remember. There's that.
There was that club gig after. Oh, there's a picture of us. I'm singing with you, so it must have been horrible.
I should have pictures in the book, that's right. You see. Anyway, that's how the Dream Syndicate started. That was the beginning of the band. And from the time we had that first rehearsal to the time we recorded our first 4-song EP, to the time we played our first show at a sold-out club in Hollywood, was a total of 4 weeks. It's crazy, right? It's not normal. And we knew that. But I think what it was, we were doing something that we were wanting to hear. We were playing music we weren't hearing elsewhere, so we said, well, we'll do it then. We were filling a vacuum, and it turns out there were other people in LA, I guess, who wanted to hear the same thing. And how would I describe what we were doing that was different? Right? How do you describe it? I would say this: we were into repetition. We were into songs with minimal chord changes that went round and round, where nothing much really happened. We were into repetition. We were into songs with minimal chord changes that went round and round, where nothing much really happened. Sorry. That was the thing. That was kind of uncommon at the time. Bands were writing very great songs. There were a lot of great bands happening all around the country. But a band would be happy to play an E chord for an hour, nothing else, and just feel it vibrate. That's kind of our turf. And when I would hear other bands doing a similar kind of thing, it was kind of exciting, you know. Kindred spirits. Inspiration, bands I can enjoy, songs I can steal. At the time, there was a band called the English Beat. Right, great band. Yeah, great band. I actually did this show in England recently. I said, the English Beat, and they went, what, mate? I said, oh, the Beat, yes, of course. They came to America, and we renamed it. Because that's what we do in America. Like the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah. But yeah, the English Beat, they had a song at the time that I really liked called Save It for Later. You know? Right, great song. Save It for Later just has 3 chords that go round and around where nothing much really happens. It's like this, just, you know. 2 dozen other dirty lovers must be a sucker for it. Cry, 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 but I don't need my mother. Just hold my hand while I get over it. Sooner or later, you'll run away and hit the ground. Save it for later, don't run away and let me down. Sooner or later, your legs give way and you'll find out. Save it for later, yeah. I like that. I thought, what if the second chord was a minor chord? Oh, that's good. And what if it was a little bit slower? That's good. And that's songwriting. you say it's a waste. Oh, not to learn from mistakes. Yeah, it's really a shame. Oh, and the scar that you show, yeah, may as well be the show. Oh, it means nothing to me, and I really don't know, 'cause I don't wanna know. Oh yeah, tell me when it's over. Tell me when it's over. Let me know when it's done. Oh, ain't there some kind of answer? Yeah, but no question was posed. Oh, you got real imagination, man, and I really don't know, 'cause I don't wanna know. Oh yeah, tell me when it's over. Tell me when it's over. Oh, let me know when it's done. And I really don't know. And I really don't know. And I really don't know. 'Cause I don't wanna know. Thanks so much. And the songs just start coming one after another. I'm standing here waiting for it to come quick. I'm standing here waiting for you to come clean. I'd ask you what you want, but I don't think you know what I mean. Something happens and they call you on the telephone. Something's missing and you know they won't leave you alone. I'm not worried about you, why you worried about me? I'm not worried about you, why should I be? I got a phone call from your mother and she wants to know where you've been. I got a phone call from your mother and she wants to know where you've been. I say, oh mother, I don't know where she's been. Something happens and they call you on the telephone. Something's missing and you know they won't leave you alone. I'm not worried about you, why you worried about me? I'm not worried about you, why should I be? I'm like, here, go, go, go. Something happens and they call you on the telephone. Something's missing and you know they won't leave you alone. I'm not worried about you, why you worried about me? I'm not worried about you, why should I be? I'm just standing here waiting for you so much. Peter said you want to do his tribute to Carl Prakoda on that. And that was
Yeah, all the little notes are in the song.
exactly. If there shouldn't be only 12 tones. So we do.
I need to set this.
Would you all please leave the room for 5 minutes so I can just... I am like the human set list. I'm like Waterworld. I have the set list, attached to my back.
Yeah.
Right?
I've never referenced Waterworld before. Anyway, thank you. It's not... Discuss. Anyway, we had the songs together and when you're a new band, you're a young band, you have a lot of songs, it's time to make a record. Especially in those days, you couldn't stream them back then. We couldn't say we're the Dream Syndicate, listen to us on Spotify, buy our CD. No, you had to make an LP. And I had a pretty good record collection. I would imagine, for example, where a Dream Syndicate record would fit in my collection. Between the Doors, Bob Dylan, near Ducks Deluxe. Always two people out. I know, a good band. Those people know. It's like, pub rock. Check it out. Anyway, it'd be, it was exciting. And to make a record, you had to find a label who was willing to kind of, put your record out. At the time in LA, the coolest record label was a label called Slash Records. Right? Slash had X and the Blasters, Gun Club, Flesh Eaters, Misfits, Lydia Lunch, all these great bands that we liked. And they came to us after just 5 months of being in band and said, we want to have the Dream Syndicate on Slash Records. Wow, pinch me, I'm dreaming kind of thing, And they said, stop pinching yourself, you're not dreaming, because we really have no money for you guys. But, if you can make your record in 3 nights, between the hours of midnight and 8 a.m. Because the studio was cheaper, maybe because they broke in, I don't know. If you can do that, we'll put your record out. We said, no problem. We have faith in our band, we love our band, we want to be on Slash Records. We have youth, we have energy, we have desire, we have drugs. We can do this. That's what we did. Went to the studio, and we successfully captured all 9 songs in that first late night session. Wandering out tired but contented at 8 a.m. Our eyes blinking off the harsh morning LA sunlight. The following night was spent on vocals and some minimal overdubs, a harmonica on Until Lately, and a foghorn-like sliding note on the solo of Tell Me When It's Over that I had borrowed from a section I'd always liked in the middle of Ramble Tamble by Creedence Clearwater Revival. Otherwise, all of the instrumental parts, including solos, were done live that first evening of tracking. On the 3rd night, we mixed the entire album in 8 hours, a fast pace. Most mixing sessions I've had since would tackle 2, maybe 3 songs a day, but never as many as the 9 songs we finished that night that ended up on the album. On that last morning, I left the studio at 8 a.m. and got into my car. The gremlin died at a Honda Civic. With a cassette of the mixes sequenced in the order they would appear on the album. I drove across town to Westwood, where I opened the Rhino record store where I worked, to start my shift. And I cranked the tape at top volume on the store's stereo system, reveling in the certainty that we had made a record that reflected the music we loved and what went down at our best live shows. And I remember thinking, well, if I never make another record again, at least I'll know I made one really great one. Dreamed last night I was born 1,000 years ago. But when I woke up, I was lost with only one way to go. When you smile, I don't know what to do, 'cause I can lose everything in a minute or two, yeah. It's not fair to put you against all other years behind, 'cause history kind of pales when it and you are aligned. Yeah. When you smile, I don't know what to do, 'cause I could lose everything in a minute or two, and it seems like the end of the world when you smile. Ain't lived a man who was anything more than both and sad. It doesn't take much to hold the possibilities back. Yeah, when you smile, I don't know what to do, 'cause I can lose everything in a minute or two, and it seems like the end of the world when you smile. Yeah. When you smile, I don't know what to do, 'cause I can lose everything in a minute or two, and it seems like the end of the world. It seems like the end of the world. It seems like the end of the world when you smile. When you smile. Thank you. Wow. Turned that into a Jefferson Airplane song, man.
Yeah.
You're mine there. But that, the album was Days of Wine and Roses when it came out, and it actually got the same kind of reception across the country we've got in LA. There were people looking for this kind of music. So we went on tour, our first tour across the country in February of 1983. The winter of the worst blizzard on the East Coast of the century, but you know, that builds calluses. And we played all the cool places, we didn't come to Athens, strange. We'd actually never played Athens. That's going to change on September 29th, by the way. That's it. Unannounced yet, but we're playing here for the first time ever. Just 40 watts. Excited about that. A little commercial break in the show. But we went and played a lot of places. We played, the Mud Club in New York, and Maxwell's, and Tuts in Chicago, and great places. I kind of want to single out one show we played because it was kind of a standout show in some ways. And I'll try to find it here. The strangest show we played on that tour may have been in Kansas City. Shane Williams wrote for the fanzine Flipside and was known as the rock and roll bank robber. And true to that moniker, he was doing time for armed robbery at Leavenworth State Penitentiary, just down the road from KC, writing about punk rock and occasionally booking bands to play for the inmates. I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true. He knew we were playing close by, so he got us a gig that would fit easily into our packed schedule, since Leavenworth stage time was mid-afternoon. We arrived early in the afternoon, and we were told that for security and contraband reasons, we couldn't use our own gear, and instead had to rely on their in-house PV backline. PV would make better gear in the ensuing years, but at the time they had a bad reputation. I remember thinking, man, prison is harsh. You gotta play through PV amps. Despite it being a maximum security prison, things seemed surprisingly lax and freewheeling. We wandered down the halls to the auditorium, inmates walking around us, unshackled, and paying uncomfortably close attention to Kendra. I had one of my seemed like a good idea at the time notions to just get up and play nothing but classic rock covers, thinking it would win over the lifers. Here's the set we played. Born on the Bayou by Creedence, Let It Rain by Eric Clapton, Outlaw Blues by Bob Dylan, Mr. Soul by Neil Young.
Yeah.
And then she remembers our song, A Little Punk Rock for Shame. What I didn't expect was complete indifference. Inmates wandered in and out, checking out a song, and then leaving. What else was on their schedule or gig plan of that day? The few that stayed for the whole set only had one response. Let the girls sing. I dropped by to pick up a reason for the thought that I caught in my head was the event of the season. Wine crowds, just a glimpse of my face could seem so pleasing. I caught down to the change, but a stranger is putting the G's on. Is it strange I should change? I don't know. Why don't you ask her? Is it strange I should change? I don't know. Why don't you ask her?
Oh my God. That's how you
By the way, thank you, because that was a much better response we got at Leavenworth. So. Anyway, we come back home from this tour, feeling pretty excited. The tour had gone really well, you know. People came to the shows and people knew our record and liked our music, and yeah, we felt pretty fancy by the time we got back to LA from the tour. A couple days after I get home from the tour, my phone rings. It's Kendra. Kendra calling in the phone. And she said, "Hey, Steve." I said, "Kendra." She said, I'm quitting the band. So you're quitting the band? Kendra, I mean, this is like everything we'd wanted, everything we'd hoped for. I said, no, it wasn't everything I'd hoped for. I just wanted to play music with my friends, cool music, you know, be in a band, play music I like that. All this touring and rock and roll stuff, it's not for me, so good luck to you guys. Oh, good luck to you, you know? Like, wow. Maybe I was a little bit older, I might have said, let's talk, let's have a cup of coffee. When you're that age, you don't talk about stuff like that. You say, see ya. And things were moving pretty fast at that time for us. We had just been asked to open a coast-to-coast tour, a 3-week tour for U2. We just put out the album War. Wow.
Yeah.
No time to think about lost bass players. Get a new one. We got a new player who learned the whole set in a couple days. Got Dave Probst, and off we went. Touring with U2, living the high life. Hanging out with Bono. Okay, for 2 minutes one night. He came backstage and said, you know, Dreams Again, you guys are great. You should all play red, white, and blue guitars. I said, cool, we'll get right on that. Anyway, it was all cool, you know, came back from the tour. And when things like that are happening, when you're getting that kind of attention, that's sort of the it band at the moment and touring with U2, the labels come sniffing around, of course, you know, and that happened. Geffen Records came to us and they said, we want to have the Dream Syndicate on Geffen Records and we want you so badly, we will put you in the studio and give you a song by Bob Dylan that nobody's heard before because our secretary is dating Bob Dylan. I said, cool. We'll look around. Next label comes around is EMI, the label of the Beatles. That's their whole name. EMI, the label of the Beatles. And EMI, the label of the Beatles, comes around and they say, we want to have the Dream Syndicate on our label and we will put you in the studio and we will help you write your songs.
Oh, yeah.
Next. Finally, we end up being approached by A&M Records. And of course, the A in A&M Records, Herb Albert. We figured, great, a label founded and run by an artist will give us the freedom to be the band we are. And sure enough, it did. They said, we just want to have the Dream Syndicate on A&M and just go play your music because we don't know why people like you. But they seem to. They said, you're going to need a producer. All right, what's a producer? I said, well, you know, this guy will help you finish your record and get things done. Okay, great. We settled on Sandy Pearlman, who we'd met on tour, and we liked him because he'd done, well, I liked him because he'd done The Dictators and The Clash, and Carl liked him because he had done Blue Oyster Cult, so we settled on him. He came to our rehearsal and he said, Steve, do you have any new songs? I said, do I have any new songs? Check this out. I'd written a new song I was excited about in the style of cowpunk. Remember cowpunk? Yeah, cowpunk. I always like it. No one says cowpunk anymore. I love saying cowpunk because I imagine like cows in a field with mohawks, you know, smoking unfiltered cigarettes, going moo. Anyway, I'd written this cowpunk song, kind of the style of Gun Club, like this sort of. Sandy said, stop. Why don't you slow it down a little bit so people can hear the words? Oh, I like that because I wrote the words. So it's more like this. 2, 3, 4. Matthew the pug nose caught me with his sister in the wheat field. Got a couple buddies, tied me up and threw me in the Oldsmobile. I said, Matthew, are you crazy? As he started closing in for the kill. Matthew slowly rolls 10, left me here to die in Maryville. There's a game they play in the summertime. There's a game they play when it's hot outside, and I wonder why they left me here in Maryville. Sally with the narrow hips cut the ropes and said that she could clear my head. She made a dirt path in the back, led me all the way to her daddy's shed. I said, Sally, you believe that we'd have to come so far for a thrill? Sally let me go that night we had spent in Merrittville. There's a game they play in the summertime. There's a game they play when it's hot outside, and I wonder why they left me here in Milledgeville. Stop me as I stumble down the road today. He said, get on your knees, boy. It's time you learn the right way to pray. I said, William, I had no idea that the Lord had such a will. William drove his point across and left me here to burn in Merrittville. There's a game they play in the summertime. There's a game they play when it's hot outside, and I wonder why. Ah, there's a game they play in the summertime. Yeah, there's a game they play when it's hot outside, and I wonder why they left me here. They left me here. They left me here in Merrittville. We went to the studio. We figured this time, now that we're on a bigger label with a big producer, a fancy studio, they bring you fruit slices in the morning. We figured it might take a little longer than 3 nights this time around, right? It might take a week. It took a week. It took 2 weeks. 3 weeks. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks. 2 months, 3 months, playing the same 8 songs, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, over and over. And suddenly, Sandy Perlman, who had all these great ideas, had only one idea for us, and it was, do it again. Yeah, do it again. Well, why don't we just kind of leave early and come back tomorrow and do it again? Maybe a little crazy, kind of nuts. We just wanted to finish the record. We wanted to keep being the Dream Syndicate, get back on tour, and keep the dream going. A little frustrating. I will say that during the course of that very frustrating experience, which I go into much more detail and painful detail in the book, I want to brace yourself for that one. As I look through this new page in my book and try to stall for time while I go through, because I've never done this section before, so I feel like this is exciting. But I will stall until I find it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank God, thank you. I like that. You will too. My evenings remained mostly free during the 6 weeks that Sandy and Carl were toiling away and racking up studio bills. One night, a friend in town asked me if I wanted to go with him to see REM, who were playing at the Kabuki Theater with Les Active and the Neat as support. What a lineup! I said yes. Peter Buck. Peter Buck had come to see us a couple of times, including our KPFK radio broadcast, and there's a possibility, often disputed, I might have taken the band's first single on consignment at Rhino when Peter was going store to store trying to get their first independent hip-tone single in the stores. You're not sure of that, right?
I don't think it was you, but you definitely stole one. But I was happy
I have money.
I was happy to have it in Rhino.
Okay. We also had a mutual friend in New York photographer, Laura Levine, who would pass messages back and forth between us via cassette recordings made in her Soho loft. In other words, we were very much on each other's radar, and I really liked their first EP and album, Murmur. The show was great, and although I've never been that big on making my way backstage for other people's shows, I went back to say hi to the band that night. I've read since then that Andy Gill and John King of Gang of Four were also there, and they ended up playing Sweet Jane with the band for the encore. I don't remember. Along with less active in the Neats, there were a whole lot of people hanging out in the dressing room. Peter and I immediately found each other and hit it off like long-lost brothers, talking about records and travel and books and many other things we still talk about today. We hightailed it out of the crowded backstage area and moved on to various bars around town, ending up with us sitting on the shoreline near Fisherman's Wharf as the sun came up, sipping from, and I say here, a bottle of whiskey, but Peter says it was schnapps.
It was schnapps.
It was schnapps. That's why it hurts so much the next day. And still going strong. It was the beginning of a lifelong friendship, one that would find us collaborating on songs and records and many more adventures in the years since. It was good. That's how we first hung out. The schnapps on the sand at 8 a.m. Anyway, that was a high point because besides that, it was a miserable 3 months. And Sandy finally said, you know what? You guys just go home for Christmas, New Year's. Great, thank you. But something happened when the new year began. By the way. Note to self, set list. Something happened when the new year began, and I reunited with Sandy in the studio and started singing again. Maybe the time off had done us all well and given us perspective. The vocals started coming more easily, and the album began to take shape. Up to that point, I think I was so distraught that we were no longer the band we had been, either in sound or mode of working, that I bristled every step of the way and alternated between anger and desolation, making the process difficult for everyone around me. Now, after I'd taken some time away, the record no longer bummed me out, but instead began to feel like its own thing. A widescreen, dramatic, and cinematic experience that sounded unlike who we had been, but also unlike anything I'd heard before. I started really digging it. Maybe because I started singing better, and that pleased Sandy. I was no longer singing every vocal like a giant fuck you to the process, but rather as a person who loved the music and wanted to add the right element. Chalk it up to finally letting go of my ego, or learning to embrace the process, or even the much needed 2 weeks apart. Maybe the schnapps on the beach. But Sandy and I were now on the same page, enthusiastically pursuing the sound and the style that became Medicine Show. I got a page one story buried in my yard, not a troubled mind. I'm going down to the Medicine Show. If I've got to choose between doing penance and doing time, I'm going down to the Medicine Show. Yes, I am. Got a one-way ticket on the 806 to the outskirts of town. going down to the medicine show. And I'll say, hey, conductor, now don't you stop until you hear that gypsy sound. I'm going down to the medicine show. Well, I know that it's hard to be a reasonable man when you start finding reasons for everything. But tonight I'll get some answers, baby. Oh, at the medicine show. At the medicine show, I'm going to find me that gypsy girl that likes to dance and cry. When I go down to the medicine show, gonna lay that burden down beneath that lonesome gypsy sky. When I go down to the medicine show, yeah, we're gonna lay that burden down beneath that lonesome gypsy sky. When I go down to the medicine show, when I go down to the medicine show, when I go down to the medicine show, when I go down to the medicine show.
We don't come out looking really good out of this story.
Well, it all starts great because we actually got out of the studio and we were finally free and we liked the record we'd made and time to go back on tour, and we were very fortunate that we were asked to be the support on an 8-week tour with REM. Right after they had released the album Reckoning. So 2 bands released their second album and we were very excited. It was a good match. And we had a great time together. I will say I had a better time with their bandwidth than with my own, but that's all discussed in the book. We had a great time on that tour, and 8 weeks, a lot of good stories. I can tell you all of them right now, but you can read about them later. But there's one thing I want to single out with me fumbling around this book. Trust me, it's worth it. There we go. Here's the story. So we did the tour 8 weeks, and the tour ended up in REM's home state of Georgia, at the Fox Theater in Atlanta. Anyone at those shows? Yeah. Really cool. Wow. Well, they had sold out 2 nights at the nearly 5,000 capacity venue. It was a heroic finale to a great 8 weeks, and we were simultaneously exhausted, but also really sad that it was over. Luckily, we were able to begin the decompression and emotional withdrawal from the life and big crowds with 4 days in Athens, cooling our heels before the start of a week-long run of headlining shows in the South, beginning in Atlanta with a show at the 688 Club, to an audience 10% of the size of the one we played to a week earlier. No problem. We had a good time with our new friends in Athens. All the members of both bands went on a field trip to a strip mall movie theater to see the movie Purple Rain, which had just opened a week earlier. Yeah, that was great. Another day, Peter called me at my hotel and said the local Uptown Lounge had a last-minute cancellation that evening and asked if he could come up with something involving members of the 2 bands to fill the night. They said they could offer each of us $25 credit at the thrift store next door. And all we could drink at the show. Peter was up for it. It's a funny segment, right? Phrase that a little. Peter was up for it, and he wondered if the Dream Syndicate would want to play a bunch of covers and some of our own songs with him on guitar. We said yes. And the legend of Adolf and the Casuals featuring Raoul was born. The name band christened by Peter himself. I remember some things about that night, but others have had to be recounted for me. I do know that my $25 was spent on a pair of suspenders, as well as a red smoking jacket that I wore on stage for the rest of the year. Most of this year, too. And also ended up wearing on the one time I was on the David Letterman show 25 years later with the Baseball Project. I also know that I made the most of the modest pay for the gig by taking the all-you-can-drink offer quite literally. Peter tells me the club owner had to cut me off at some point. But not before I had cajoled our makeshift combo to play the current hit movie theme to Ghostbusters. Not once, not twice, but 3 times during our set. It wasn't an ironic gesture. We all liked the song, and that night we reduced it to a distant cousin of Van Morrison's Gloria, which it resembled in chords and cadence. I think the 3rd rendition came with our keyboard player Tommy on drums and most of the handful of fans who'd come to the show long since gone. The night ended up with me asleep on the sidewalk outside our tour bus, and the driver cajoling me, jostling to get me back on my bunk. It's a very resilient jacket. I don't know. I think I know we should play right now. You know it yet? Something strange in the neighborhood. Who you gonna call? Ghostbusters. Something weird and it ain't no good. Who you gonna call? Ghostbusters. Truck. That's the only line I know of that song. A little better. We're going to do 2 more times right now. Anyway, it was great. It was a great experience, and we just happy to be back on the road, being band again. And we started touring Europe a lot, which worked out really well for us. kind of gave us a new life. Once again, we discovered there was a whole new audience that were hungry for what we were doing. So we started having fun out there. But after about 7 years of being a band, we felt like, I don't know, it was kind of the end. 7 years, it's a long time. It had been my entire adult life at that point, 7 years. 7 years. For a dog, that's 49 years. And for a band, that's 250 years. Because you're together all the time, and if you like each other, it's like, oh my God, you again? I guess I wanted to play other kinds of music. I wanted to see other people. So we went in to make our fourth album, an album called Ghost Stories. We went, make that, and I kind of knew it was going to be our last record. Oh, by the way. I think that could help. Oh, the 12 string. Set list. We went to make our final record, and I felt like this is the last record we were going to make. So I wanted the last song to be a really dramatic farewell. I wrote a song called "When the Curtain Falls," and the song was sort of in my mind at the time when I wrote it in 1987, kind of a statement. I felt it was like a statement on the world, on the geopolitical state of the world. I figured in 1987, things had gone completely crazy. I could never get any crazier. This was wrong. But the thing is, I played this song many times over the years, and I realized it wasn't actually a political or world statement. It was more a song about the end of something, a sad ending, something that you love so much, but rather than feeling it exploding, just feeling it fading away sadly into nothing. I knew I'd written a song about the end of the Dream Syndicate.
Skipped ahead to the end of the bird. Took a chance and took a risk. Sometimes weak and sometimes weary. Sometimes an answer isn't necessary. Curtain fall. In this town, nothing is laid to rest. Nothing wasted, nothing second guessed. Sometimes a fool rises, sometimes a good man falls. Sometimes we don't pay attention at all. I'll see you when the curtain falls. There's a bad moon on the rise tonight. It might be time to set the story right. We can crawl and we can creep. We'll make excuses till we laugh ourselves to sleep. I'll see you when the curtain falls. The audience has rushed the stage, but no one's there to meet their rage. Passed out drunk on cheap delights, too bored to scream, too tired to fight.
Once again, Peter Buck. Anyway, that's the end of the book. That's the end of the book. And, yeah, big book. Which means it's the end of the show. But it's really not the end, because that was 1988. My publisher, Jawbone Press in the UK, said, you should start the book in 1988 so you have something for your next book. Next book. I'm working on it. But the reality is, that was 1988, and this is 2026. I'm still here. And a lot's happened in my life. Not even my wife clapped. It's our anniversary. It's our 18-year anniversary. Yes, it is. But like I said, more has happened in the years since then. You know, in the years since, I've made a lot of solo records on my own with the wonderful Miracle 3. I've played in a band called Gutterball for a few years from Richmond. It was very own Officer Welford in the band. I played in a really strange band that I didn't see on my bingo card. A band that for 18 years has recorded nothing but songs about baseball. Having a baseball project. And you know, a lot of things. But in some ways, the thing that meant the most to me in some ways is that in 2012, after 24 years apart, we reformed the Dream Syndicate. I did not imagine that happening. And we're still going, you know, because you can only break up a band one time. Now, when bands reunite, people always say the same thing. If it's good, they say, man, they picked up right where they left off. You know, how was that band you saw that reunited? They picked up right where they left off. We didn't pick up where we left off. We picked up where we started, playing music we loved for ourselves, you know, music we wanted to hear in our heads. As long as we liked it, it was cool. If other people liked it, great. If they didn't, you know, the monkeys. We're still going strong. And you know, over the course of writing the book, which I spent the last 4 years doing and doing this show the year since, it's a pretty intense thing. Oh, by the way, the book is for sale here tonight. I will be signing it after the show, so please come by. There are a lot more stories, so I'd love to have you take it home with you with my scrawl inside. Even Peter's just lovely pictures of Peter Buck singing. But anyway, in the course of writing this book, and I try to be as honest as possible in the stories, there's a lot of self-examination. You spend hours a day thinking about your own life. That's a strange thing to do. And there are a lot of ups and downs. You start thinking, did I really say that, or do that, or not say that? And be think that, a lot of things like that. It's a lot of examination. But at the end of writing the book, at the end of each of these shows, I realized, wait a second, I'm still here. We're all still here. You know? The lucky ones. We're here tonight in a beautiful theater with friends, with loved ones, enjoying a night together. The future laid out before us. Anything is possible. That's a wonderful thing. And I realize, no matter what's happened in your life before, all the things that you've thought about, all the things you've done, I'd like to think that those days were, and still are, and hopefully always will be, the days of wine and roses. So thank you all very much for coming. From outside his sheets on the ledge again, flying the crowd and threatening everything. I'm here wondering just where I fit in. Everybody says I don't care.
Her mother said it's your fault, you never looked after her. Father's arranging to get back the furniture. I'm here wondering what the reasons were. Everybody says I don't care. I'm just trying to remember. Thanks, Kevin, for doing a great sound. Thanks to Twitter for bringing me around. That was great. Thank you. There's no backstage. Do you want to hear a couple more songs? We'll call the encore. We do a lot of our songs by like, people write the music and send me things or send by email, and I got this music while I was on a solo tour in a hotel room in Buffalo after a show on a really bad weather night. Not the best hotel either. I kind of made my next such good music. I went, I can work with that. And it was,
Steve, you're working with Mitch Easter.
oh yeah.
Can you write something that sounds like Murmur in 1983? I did it on my phone and mailed it off.
Yeah. You're really good at doing that. You're
Imitating myself
Yeah.
for 40 years. I should be really fucking
So it was a song about ball players who travel from team to team, town to town, and just go where the action is, which strange enough is what we do. So it's, for baseball players and musicians, it's called Journeyman.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3.
I go from town to town. I do one thing well, that's why I stick around. You can call me Lefty, it's my stock in trade. I'm a specialist, it's how I get paid. Never get too close to anyone, long as there's someone who meets me down the road I'll go. There was that one October down in Baltimore. We were the champions, we wrapped it up in 4. By the time spring came around, he sent me down the line. I still ran the train to remind me of better times.
one thing well, it's why I stick around. Here all these years, how do I find the drive? Well, I like it, I'm good at it, it makes me feel alive. Always keep my bags packed, never get too close to anyone, long as there's someone who needs me, down the road I'll go. Always keep my bags packed, never get too close to anyone, long as there's someone who needs me, down the road I'll go. I'm the journeyman, I'm the journeyman, I'm the journeyman. I'm the journeyman, I do what I can. I'm the journeyman.
Last we wrote together another baseball song. And once again, thanks very much for coming out tonight. I'll be out there signing stuff. Yeah. Thank you. I was hoping that would happen.
Oh, yes. Red book. Live through some of the shit.
This, of course, is 80% of the baseball project. I close the limit bit. You kiss the drummer. And the bass player. Well, this is great. We're going to leave you this one here, and it's a song by Mark the Bird Fidrich called 1976.
Saw your picture in the paper today, and I couldn't believe my eyes. Dead before your time, but so long beyond your prime. Looking nothing like the memory from when I was a kid. Golden hair flowing down on your knees, grooving the pictures down, and it's always 1976. The camera lies and the mirror plays tricks. So many things that the years won't fix. Always 1976. Always 1976. Said again for fading over the city, and you should mix in shame. A rock star had arrived. Fidrich comes alive, and I know that it's hardly fair to say you won't grow old, but forgive me if I try to keep that faded image in my eyes. And it's always 1976. The camera lies and the mirror plays tricks. So many things that the year won't fix. Always 1976. Always 1976. What does it say for the rest of us when our heroes die and leave us alone? What does it say for the rest of us when we wake up high. This bird has flown.
What a great surprise.
Never saw that coming.
You enjoy that?
I mean, I don't know the music.
No, I mean, I only knew a couple of the numbers and 3 or 4 dates that I knew. Athens.
That's right, Athens.
Yep. See you in a bit.